Good morning, US, and good morning, Italy. Good afternoon, Italy, actually. My name is SILVIA RAFFA, and I'm with the Italian Chamber of Commerce in Chicago. On behalf of the Italian Chamber, I welcome you to our webinar, Become an Italian Citizen, organized with our member company, the Italian Citizenship Assistance. So let me extend a special welcome today to our guest, Marco PERMUNIAN, CEO and US Office Director of the IACC, and to RAFAEL Di Furia, video podcaster and media advisor and production specialist. He has also a YouTube channel that you can read on his profile, Not Your Average Globe Better. Yeah, where he talks about living abroad as an Italian and dual citizen expat. So I would like to start with a few words on the IACC. The Italian Citizenship Assistance is an international firm with offices both in Italy and in the United States that help individuals in both countries and elsewhere apply for Italian citizenship, use sanguinis by right of blood, and also who are not of Italian descent, applying for the Italian citizenship either through marriage or residency. The company is made up of a team of legal experts, genealogists, translators, and dual citizenship attorneys who have helped hundreds of Americans with Italian descent obtain Italian citizenship via the consulates in the US, via applications filled in Italy, or via judicial proceedings for cases which need to be filed in court. And now I would like to welcome again Marco, and I would love to start with you by asking you a series of questions that we thought are the most popular, that people are looking for to be answered by you. So let's start with the first question. What documents do you need to apply for the Italian citizenship by descent?
Thank you. To apply for Italian citizenship by descent, you need several documents, which are basically vital record documents. So birth certificates, marriage records, death certificates, for all of the individuals in your Italian line and their spouses. So you will need birth certificates, marriage records, death certificates, not only for the people that are in your Italian line, but also for their spouses who are not in the Italian line, especially if you are applying through an Italian consulate in the US. When you're applying in Italy, you don't need as many documents because Italy does not require, normally when you're applying through an Italian municipality, you don't need also the birth certificates and death certificates for the individuals who are married to the individuals in the Italian line. Besides those documents, you also need the naturalization records of your Italian-born ancestor to prove when exactly your Italian-born ancestor became naturalized. That's very important because that also determines if you qualify for Italian citizenship by descent, because you will only qualify if your Italian-born ancestor became naturalized after the birth of their child who was born in the US. If your ancestor never naturalized, it means that you also qualify for Italian citizenship, but you need to basically prove that he never naturalized. And normally you need to collect letters from the Department of State and the National Archives, basically those offices that hold the naturalization records, to prove that there is no naturalization for your Italian-born ancestor. Now, you also will need normally census records taken, the census record taken after the birth of the child of your Italian-born ancestor, to prove that the ancestor was not naturalized at that time. Now, these are normally the documents that you need to obtain to apply for Italian citizenship by descent, but every case is unique. So depending on your case, you may need other documents. Your case might fall into a specific category that requires more documents. But let's say that these are the basic documents that you have to collect to show that you qualify for Italian citizenship and to present your application. The vital record documents that I mentioned before can be collected from the counties in America, from the states. It depends on where these documents are to be collected. So you may have to contact the Department of Vital Statistic, or you may be able to obtain documents more quickly from a county. So again, it depends on your specific case. And the documents from Italy, meaning the birth certificate of your ancestor or ancestors, and the marriage record, if they were married in Italy, those can be obtained from the municipality, which is the town in Italy where the ancestor or ancestors were born or got married. And those can be obtained by basically contacting the municipality. It's a little bit hard if you are abroad to contact a municipality in Italy directly. So you may want to use an attorney or a person who is in Italy, because municipalities in Italy tend to not mail documents abroad easily. But the good thing, though, is that the Italian documents only need to be obtained. There is nothing else you have to do with regard to the Italian documents. Instead, with regard to the US documents, they need to be apostilled and translated into Italian. The apostille is basically a certification of the document, which is required by law because your document was obtained abroad. So in order to use it in Italy, you need to obtain an apostille. And the American documents also need to be translated into Italian.
All right. Yeah, it sounds very tricky, but that's why you are here, right, Marco?
Absolutely.
Otherwise, if it was easy, everybody would do it by their own. All right. So of course, I see there are already some questions. What I wanted to say, I also have thousands of questions when you talk, but I would like to go over the webinar, the questions, and then have the Q&As at the end of our talk. So people, maybe if everybody has a question, please, you can write it down and then we will discuss it at the end. So let's continue here. And the second question is, how do you book an appointment for the Italian citizenship? Via a consulate and via a municipality?
Yeah, before I answer that question, just with regard to your last question, when you said it's very tricky to collect documents to support an application, it is, especially because the most difficult part of the process is not really to collect documents, but to make sure that the information on the documents is consistent and that there are no major discrepancies, because that's normally what causes issues with an application. So it's not only a matter of collecting documents, but also to be able to amend documents as best as you can to make your application acceptable. Yeah. But to answer your second question, how do you book an appointment with the consulate? So first of all, you can only apply for citizenship by descent if you live in the US. through the consulate that basically covers the jurisdiction where you reside. So if you reside in a certain state, you have to understand which is the consulate that you have to use. So you cannot choose which consulate to use, but you have to use the consulate that you have to use based on your place of residency. And there is, of course, a huge interest in applying for Italian citizenship by descent, which means that there is a long wait time normally to be able to file the application through an Italian consulate in America. Now, it's a long wait time. It's not super long as it is in other countries. Like I know in Brazil, for example, the wait time to file the application to have an appointment with the consulate can even be 8-10 years. So something extremely long, but
and that's even better than how it used to be.
I know there's this waiting list, and you just have to be patient until they call you, and they say we will call you in like between 5 and 10 years, which is, of course.
Yeah, it's first the waiting list, and then once you're past the wait list, then they give you a wait list for the appointment list. It's like it's a whole crazy thing. But not for Americans.
Italy.
This is specific to Brazil.
Yes, which I'm glad you said that, because now what I'm going to say regarding the Italian consulate in America is not going to sound that bad, because the wait time for an appointment tends to be, let's say it's a maximum normally of 2 years. So the Italian consulates in America, they tend to respect this 2 years time frame. So if you book an appointment today, depending on the consulate, the maximum that you normally have to wait is 2 years for your appointment. There are some consulates that are quicker, but like I said, unfortunately, you cannot decide which consulate to use. So you have to use the consulate that in the jurisdiction where you reside. Now, how do you book an appointment? It's actually quite easy. Meaning that you create your account on the website of the consulate, and so you have to set a password, use your email, enter some personal information, and then you wait for an appointment to become available, which could happen quickly if you are in a jurisdiction where the consulate is not that busy, or you may have to wait until appointments are made available by the consulate. So it's not only a matter of creating an account, but it's a matter of creating an account and then waiting, in some cases, waiting for an appointment to be released, and then you can grab it, and then you'll have your appointment, which will be maybe in 18 months or 2 years. But that's basically how it works. So the very first thing that you should do is you should book your appointment with the consulate, and then you have the time to gather all the necessary records. Of course, these are the general guidelines. There are some consulates that operate differently, but normally this is what happens. With regard to the application in Italy, it's a quicker process because you don't have to wait for your appointment. So if you have the ability to travel to Italy, you can basically skip the consulate and bypass the consulate completely. And as soon as you have all your documents ready, which may take several months to acquire, you can travel to Italy, but you will have to establish your residency in Italy and remain in Italy for the duration of the process. But the advantage is that you don't have to wait all that time for your appointment with the consulate.
You can take a long vacation in Italy and wait for
exactly
a 2 years vacation. Yeah, so talking always about the municipality and consulate, does the consulate and municipality provide the applicant with his or her records back after the appointment?
That's a very interesting question. A lot of people are interested in whether they basically will be able to hold on to a copy of their documents, which which takes so long to acquire. So a lot of people are worried, will I be able to retain these documents? And the answer is no, because you are going to have to use those original documents to apply for citizenship. So regardless of whether you apply through a consulate or directly in Italy, you normally have to basically give up your documents, give your documents to the consulate, and they will retain your documents on file. So you can either make photocopies for your own records, or while you are in the process of acquiring the documents, you can just get a second certified copy of each single document, which normally is also a good way to go, because the second certified copy, if it's acquired simultaneously, it's less expensive than the first certified copy. So you could just order two certified copies of each document if you want to have a set of documents for your own record.
Okay, interesting. And what is the processing time to be recognized as an Italian citizen via a consulate and via a municipality?
As I said before, there is a huge interest in applying for Italian citizenship, and not only the waiting time can be long if you are using an Italian consulate in the US, but also the processing time can be rather long, meaning that after you have presented your application, the consulate has a maximum of 2 years to process your application by law. Now, whether it will take 2 years, that we can't say for certain. They have some backlogs, so they tend to use a good part of those 2 years to process an application, but of course it could be that it's processed more quickly.
Right. If you said, if you're confirming what you said before, I mean, probably.
Yeah, but if you are applying in Italy, it's much quicker, because, like I said, you don't have to wait for an appointment. You can just in most municipalities, you can just travel, and maybe you just contact them beforehand. Before you travel, you contact the municipality just to make sure that they have availability to assist you, and that they will let you present your application for citizenship. But it's not that you have to wait for an appointment. So you just go there and apply for citizenship if you have all the necessary documents. And then after, once the application has been filed, it normally takes an average of, say, 7-8 months for the application to be processed. So it's much more quicker to apply in Italy.
Okay, so the processing time is once it's filed, it's other 9 months, something like that.
Yes, that's the average.
Yeah, that's a question a lot of people are asking me as well, because obviously you don't have no idea how long this could go, 5-10 years, 2 years.
And also during the process itself, there's no real way to kind of check on updates. How are things going? It's just kind of, when it happens, it happens. When you finally get the answer, that's it.
Yeah, you have to do it and then kind of think about something else.
Hurry up and wait.
Another interesting question is regarding the language. Do you need to speak Italian to apply for citizenship at an Italian consulate or at a municipality in Italy?
That's another good question. So when you're applying for citizenship by descent, the answer is that you don't have to speak Italian. And there is a very specific reason behind that, because technically speaking, you are an Italian citizen since birth. So you're just basically going through a process to have your right to Italian citizenship recognized. So to have the fact that you were born with Italian citizenship recognized, and that's why you don't have to speak Italian. And speaking Italian, it's not really necessary when you apply through a consulate, because the clerk will speak to you in English. If it's a consulate based in America, they may just maybe say some words in Italian sometimes just to give you a hard time, but it's not a legal requirement for you to speak Italian when you are at the consulate, or there is no language test. But when you are applying for citizenship in Italy, although there is no legal requirement for you to speak Italian, it may be hard if you're applying by yourself to navigate the process and speak to the clerks in Italian, because you can be sure that probably none of the clerks that you're going to be dealing with at the Italian municipality will speak English.
All right, that's good. I'm sure a lot of people are relieved, like, oh my God, I don't have to like go back with my vocabulary and go back to the Italian language. And so this is a question you already answered, but I don't know if you want to add something. But what the question that I have is, what are the advantages of applying for citizenship in Italy as opposed to applying via a consulate?
So yeah, basically the advantage is that you can make the process much quicker, and so that's the main advantage, other than, of course, enjoying life in Italy for some time.
That's a big one right there. I mean, you get a jump start on life, basically.
Other than having an excuse to be like, I'm sorry, I have to leave for
like, oh no, I have to go spend time in Italy. Oh, I can't believe this. Oh, what will I do?
on a beach in the south of Italy. Yeah.
Just put me in front of a table. I'm happy.
All right. But, so there is this is the main advantage. So time-wise.
But there are some, I want to say there are some, not necessarily disadvantages, but something to consider, because if you apply in Italy, you'll have to stay in Italy for the duration of the process. So it's actually a relocation, even if it's for some time, for the duration of the process, which could take even less than 6 months if you're lucky. But you're going to have to go there, establish residency, which means you're going to have to rent an apartment, apply for a tax code, and live your life in Italy for some time while you are in the process of applying for Italian citizenship.
Yeah, that's probably, if you are retired, it's a good thing. Otherwise, it's a little difficult. But yeah.
Sorry, just to interrupt quickly there.
You have to kind of help obviously the Italian economy also run a little bit by staying there. No?
Well, also just on that point though, it's not so that there's no confusion. It's not just older people who can do that, but there are a lot of younger people, even digital nomads and so on, like people close to like kind of the age range that I would be in, for example, like late 20s, early 30s, that are also very interested in this. Even I've met people who are in their early 20s who will be able to take this time abroad because they're either learning remotely or they're working remotely, or they're taking a gap year. So it's not just the older people, just so that nobody gets into this mindset, oh no, I have to wait or anything like that. Because there's so many people who think it's like so inaccessible, but it really is so very accessible to many different people.
Yeah, you're right. Because after you will explain your experience, you're a world traveler, so we can get inspired by your lifestyle and life choices. Okay, so let's move to another question. Can I apply for the citizenship with my family in Italy? Oh yeah,
that's another good question. So a lot of people are wondering if they can basically, first of all, if they can apply on behalf of family members. And the answer is unfortunately no, meaning that it's not that you can file an application on behalf of a sibling or a child or maybe a parent. Everyone who wants to apply for citizenship needs to formally apply, with the exception of minor children. I will elaborate in a second. But everybody who wants to apply for citizenship needs to formally apply, which means that if you are going to apply for citizenship in Italy, you will have to travel. And if you have other family members who want to apply for citizenship in Italy, they will have to travel 2 and establish residency in Italy and have a lease agreement. You can share the same apartment, you can share the same lease agreement, but you're going to have to be physically present there. And of course, if somebody cannot travel, then there will be someone who maybe a family member who applies through a consulate in the US and a member of the same family who applies through an Italian municipality. So if you cannot all travel, you're going to have to apply in different places. Like I said, the exception is that minor children, they don't necessarily have to apply for citizenship because they will be included in the parents' application. So, for example, they may not have to travel to Italy because the parent can apply, and then once the parent is recognized, the parent can basically register the birth certificates of the kids if they're still underage at that time. So that's an exception. And when you apply for citizenship through a consulate, your children, for example, if they're minors, they don't have to show up for the interview, just you have to go. And also one last thing on this point, that if you have intermediate descendant that are alive, like a grandparent or a parent, they will not get Italian citizenship automatically just because you're applying. So if they want to get citizenship, they will have to formally apply.
Okay, that's interesting. So you would suggest to all parents, if you have a kid that is minor, before, so 2 or 3 years before, they should apply, so that they have to do the process just once, I guess. The last question, what are the benefits of applying for the Italian citizenship? It's a big question.
There are, of course, many benefits. And just one thing that I wanted to say is that Italian citizenship is very popular because it's one of the easiest citizenship that you can get in Europe if you have Italian ancestry, meaning that there are no big limitations like there are for people who are of Spanish descent, or maybe people want to apply for Irish citizenship by descent. I know there are there are some strict requirements that you have to meet. There are some generational limits. With regard to Italian citizenship, there are, for example, no generational limits. You don't have to speak the language. So it's quite easy to qualify and to apply if you are of Italian descent in comparison to other European citizenships, because some people, they have Italian ancestry, they have maybe Irish ancestry at the same time, and they're wondering which one should I go for. Of course, when you get Italian citizenship, you will have access to the whole European Union. So not only to Italy, but you can relocate and live and work freely in any European country. And your spouse can do the same. So if you're married, of course, your spouse can also apply for Italian citizenship through marriage. But in the meantime, just because it's Italian citizenship through marriage requires a language test. In the meantime, your spouse is eligible for a residency permit for spouses of Italian citizens, which is valid also, which can be obtained also in other European countries. So, for example, if you are of Italian descent and obtain Italian citizenship and relocate to Spain, your spouse is eligible for a residency permit for a Spanish residency permit for spouses of European citizens. But other benefits would be healthcare. So the Italian healthcare is one of the best in the world, and it's free of charge for its citizens. So of course, it's a lot less expensive than treatments in the US. And universities in Italy and in Europe are very affordable and very high quality. It's easier to access employment opportunities in the European Union because you don't have to go through visa application processes if you are an Italian citizen. So it's easier for companies to hire you. And finally, it's a legacy for your children because once you're an Italian citizen and you go through this process, which may sound daunting and difficult to people, well, your children will not have to go through the same process after you become an Italian citizen, because for them becoming, even for future generations and future children, for them becoming Italians will be much easier, because they will become Italians basically just by registering their birth certificates, which is a very easy and quick process.
All right, thank you. I would like to, before we go over with Rafael and listen to his story, I would like to do a little break and have some people here. If you have any questions for Marco, you should raise your hand. Yeah, I see a lot of hands, and we will allow you. We thought it would be a little bit more personal and nicer to have people be able to talk instead of writing everything by chat. So let's start with Tracy Learman, if I pronounce it right.
Got it. Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. My question is, if one parent acquired citizenship prior to marriage and having children, and then subsequently would like to begin the application process for their children, maybe you can explain that to me. Thank you.
So if you become an Italian citizen prior to getting married and having children, once you have children, the process for them to become Italian citizens is as easy as registering their birth certificates, which is a very easy process, as long as you do so before they turn 18, because if they turn 18, then they will have to go through your same process, which is the long process that we talked about so far. So the process for them will be very easy as long as you, the parent, register the birth certificates before they turn 18. And that will apply also to your grandchildren, meaning that once your children are Italian citizens, if they will have children in the future, they can simply register the birth certificates and they will become Italians. As for your spouse can apply for citizenship, but there is a language test. The level is lower intermediate, so you have to take a language test. And your spouse can apply for citizenship after 3 years from the marriage, if you're living abroad as a couple, or 2 years from the marriage if you're living in Italy, and the time is cut into half if you have minor children. And your spouse, so these 3 years or 2 years or half of that time if you have children is to be counted from the date of the marriage, not from when you become an Italian citizen. So even if you, for example, if you become an Italian citizen today and you have already been married for 3 years, your spouse can start the citizenship process through marriage immediately. And if they can't apply for citizenship through marriage because they can't learn the language, like I said, they're eligible for a residency permit for spouses, which is valid basically in the whole European Union, which is very easy to acquire for the spouse.
Let's move to Ellen Asper.
Yeah, hey. Buongiorno, grazie, etc. My situation is a little bit different. My spouse is an Italian citizen. We've been married for 30 years. Our grown son is also an Italian citizen through her. I just never bothered to go through, this process. I guess one thing I'm trying to determine, and my interest is mostly not in working, but in retiring in Italy or in the EU. And I guess, is it worth the trouble, for lack of a better word, for me to do this if we were to retire to Italy or the EU? Or should I just, as Marco just said, get a spouse residency permit, and for example, property, et cetera, would all be through my wife because she's a citizen? I guess I'm trying to get the advantages of citizenship if possible, but not because of my wife, but not necessarily go through all the hoops that we've discussed today. And I'd appreciate your advice. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. So the residency permit for spouses is a very powerful tool basically gives you, I want to say, almost all the rights of a citizen. So you can work, you can use the healthcare system, you can live indefinitely in the in one single European country. So what are the differences between that and citizenship? The most obvious difference, which is what people normally are not interested in, is the right to vote. So you cannot vote for the Italian or European Parliament if you're not a citizen. But that's, of course, I would assume not so relevant for most people. So what's the real difference? That if you are a residency permit holder, first of all, your status is connected to your spouse being a resident in one single European country. So if you, for example, are married to an Italian and want to relocate to Spain, you can only apply for a Spanish residency permit if your spouse is a resident in Spain, which means that you can't live separately. For example, it's not that you can live in Spain and your spouse can go back and forth between America and Spain. At least for the first few years, your status will be connected to that of your spouse. The second difference, and of course, it goes without saying that for the first few years, if I'm not mistaken, it's 3. If you get divorced or separated, you lose your right to reside in the European Union. And the second difference would be that as a residency permit holder, you can only reside in one European country, which is the one country where your spouse is registered as a resident, which would be Spain in the example that I just gave. And you can only travel in the other European country as a tourist with a 90 days limit. So basically as anybody else, which means that while your spouse can be a resident of Spain and go anywhere in the European Union completely freely, you can't. Which means that if you want to change country, so you can go on vacation to another European country, but only on vacation. If you want to change countries, so move from Spain to Germany, what you have to do is your spouse needs to become a resident of Germany or Italy or any other European country, and then you can apply for a residency permit, for a new residency permit in that country, which will only allow you to reside in that country.
And then also just one thing, Marco, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm remembering in one of the episodes of the podcast, the Italian citizenship podcast that we do, you mentioned it wasn't, because you kind of touched on this just before, about that for the first few years, it's contingent on the marriage, so separation or whatever, but it's also contingent on the spouse continuing to be alive. So that may be a little bit dark, but
of course,
a caveat worth considering as well.
Of course. Absolutely, it's true.
Okay, let's move over to Joanne. She can unmute. She needs to, yeah, now here you go.
Salve, Marco. Marco, my great-grandfather was born in Italy and came to the United States with my grandmother. All 4 of my grandparents were born in Italy, but my grandfathers became naturalized before my parents were born. I understand that if I took up residency in Italy, that after a certain amount of time, I could apply for citizenship. Is that correct? And if so, how long would I have to wait to apply? Also, I don't know if either of my grandmothers, well, I think one of them became naturalized. I don't know about the other one. Can you obtain citizenship through your grandmother?
Okay, so first of all, I would definitely look into other avenues, if any, to apply for citizenship by descent. So in other words, I would consider all my options and see if there is a viable path for me to apply for citizenship by descent. And sometimes it's not that easy to determine. So, for example, we offer a free assessment of your case, and we will tell you if there is maybe some way for you to qualify for citizenship by descent. And sometimes there are cases that are very unique. So you qualify because, like, one of the ancestors gained citizenship through marriage and then passed it on to the children. So there can be some very unique scenarios. So that's the first thing that I would do. But if you don't qualify for citizenship by descent and you have either a parent or a grandparent, so like in your situation, who was born in Italy, then you can apply for citizenship through residency. Normally, to apply for citizenship through residency, meaning based on the fact that you've been a resident in Italy, it takes 10 years. But for people who have an Italian parent or grandparent, it takes only 3 years. So you have to have spent 3 years in Italy, and then you can file for citizenship through residency, which means you need to have had a visa for 3 years, any kind of visa, a work visa or retirement visa. Then after 3 years, you can apply for citizenship through residency, which means that you have to provide a language test. The process is very similar to the process for citizenship through marriage. So you have to provide a language certificate, and you have to also have a very basic income, and then you can apply for citizenship through residency. And I believe your other question was, can I use my grandmother? And it's absolutely worthwhile understanding if you can use your grandmother, because you may qualify for citizenship by descent. You may have a normal case or a 1948 case, and we have done a lot of episodes on our podcast about 1948 cases, where basically there's a female ancestor who had a child before January 1st, 1948, which means that you don't technically qualify for citizenship by descent, but you can file a 1948 case, which means that you can obtain citizenship by descent through the courts using the precedents. There's a lot of information on our website about 1948 cases. There's a 2009 Supreme Court's decision that allows people to claim citizenship through a female ancestor, even if the child was born before 1948. And if you have that case, you can pursue citizenship that way, which does not require that you relocate to Italy. You can have an attorney represent you in court. It will take a couple of years. You don't have to speak Italian. And you can do also the two things simultaneously. You can file a 1948 case and at the same time relocate to Italy and apply for citizenship through residency and see which one is happening quicker.
Grazie mille, Marco.
Prego.
Okay, so let's move to Jolie Dall'Osto. We can also see you. No, you're still unmuted. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate Silvia and Raphael and Marco. Very informative. I have my wife and I'm the half Italian here, have just retired. And I have two cousins cuginos who have gone through the process and actually gotten citizenship based on the blood, the sanguinis. Both of my Italian grandparents came to the United States early 20th century. My father, as well as his 9 other siblings, born here before they became naturalized and whatever. So I think we'll be okay without a 1948 case, but I'll defer to you. My question is, they have some of the paperwork, but I'm going to have to get it together, new copies, new certified copies. One of the cousins did it on his own, and it took a while. The other one hired a service, and I know you folks have a service like that too, and we can talk off after the seminar on that and communicate on that. What do you think for someone like me, even though I'm a recently retired lawyer, the avocat, at the same time, I don't do immigration. And what are your thoughts about getting a service to follow up, just to get it done sooner? With less headache.
Well, this is a process that you could do on your own, for sure. It's not going to be easy to do it on your own, but you can. You don't need an attorney to represent you, as you just said. Like one of your cousins did it on his own. And if you do your research, if you spend time researching and maybe reading information online, and we have a very informative podcast too that you can on YouTube, myself and Raphael, you can watch that, and it's absolutely doable to take care of the process of your own. Now, a few years back, the process was easier because there were less people interested in applying for Italian citizenship. So now, because of the huge interest, the consulates tend to push back people a little bit, or let's say somehow discourage people, and they focus on discrepancies or documents collected in the wrong format, to maybe delay applications or even reject applications if you don't do the amendments to your documents properly. So the final answer is you can do it on your own, yes. Is it better to use a service or an attorney? Probably.
Okay. And with the consulates, one last follow-up. I know there is a standard, and for my 45 years practicing, doing criminal defense and other cases, the lawyers usually get their cases called first versus the unrepresented. Is there a little benefit too, or not really so much? It's who's in line.
So in terms of that, using a lawyer, it's probably not going to make any difference. You may save time because the documentation that you present is complete at the first attempt, and you don't have to attempt multiple times. Some consulates, they will allow you to integrate your application if something's missing, maybe by mail after your appointment, but they will give you maybe a deadline for you to do so. Some consulates may ask you to book a second appointment if your documentation is incomplete.
Okay, so to continue the conversation, not today, I can contact Marco at Italian Citizenship.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I wanted to, I know there are other hands, but I would like to step back and talk a little bit with our other guest speaker. I want to make sure we also have a good conversation with him, and we have enough time. So Raphael, let's start with you. I have some questions for you as well. And the first one is, what was your experience of living in Italy? Tell us all about it.
It was amazing. Really being a dual citizen helped to unlock Italy in a very unique way, to be able to truly experience it, because I'd been living abroad even before living in Italy. Like I had actually gotten my own citizenship, kind of tying it back to the last question. I did it for myself, but in the end, I really regretted doing it because it took so long for me to get to Italy to be able to enjoy all of these beautiful things, because I was able to arrive in Italy, just hop off the plane, and it's like, I'm here. I have citizenship. I can start working right away. I can open up a bank account. I can get an apartment. I can do all of these things without a second thought behind it. And I'd been living in other countries where you always have the thought just kind of looming over you. Oh, am I going to have to renew a visa? Am I going to have to renew and apply again, or this or that? But when you're a citizenship, there's no renewal. There's no reapplying. It's just, that's it. You are what you are. And so being able to be in Italy and be able to experience all these things was truly wonderful, because I could just live the life and learn how life is lived in Italy. Like growing up, I mean, there's so many of us who grew up with these second or third hand stories about life in the old country and what things were like. And I mean, I was raised on my grandfather's lap hearing all of these stories about Italy. But it's another thing to be able to get to experience the country on your own, to live it through your own eyes, to see it for yourself. And I mean, even just for example, like, again, getting back to the stories, for so many of us who have family that left before we were maybe even born, there are these stories of how Italy once was, but the Italy that we have today has definitely progressed and moved forward. And so some of these stories that we may have heard may not necessarily be completely reflective of the exact experience that you have. I mean, there's something that's definitely cherished and held by the Italian American community. And there's, even within the Italian American community itself, there are aspects of the culture that are much more reminiscent and more representative of what life was like maybe 50, 80, 100, 120 years ago, because that's when our families left off. And so it's almost like this fork in the road where our families kind of had this one particular idea, and Italy moved off and kept growing in a different direction, but there's still this thread that connects them at the end. So yeah, I mean, like I said, really just to repeat myself here, being able to actually make a life for myself in the country was really what made it worthwhile.
And what did like being an Italian citizen helped you while you were living in Italy?
Sorry, you broke up there for just a second. I didn't quite.
Like, how did being an Italian citizen, how did that help you while you were living in Italy?
So in that perspective, from that perspective, again, kind of, especially with work, I didn't have any questions. Like, I could just go into a job, just apply for a job, and it's like, well, how are you legal to work here? You're just an American. I'm not just an American. Slap down the passport on the table. I'm one of you guys, more or less. And so that made a really big difference. And then also, again, like not having any limit on how much time that I could spend in the country. This is really, again, kind of the way which it really made a massive difference in the end.
Right. Yeah, I imagine. And what are the advantages of being an Italian and thus a European citizen now that you have relocated to Portugal? Because a lot of people today don't know, but maybe give us a little bit of insight about that as well.
Yeah, so actually for the past few years, well, more than a few, for the past 5 years, I've been living in Italy. First, I lived up in Alto Adige and absolutely loved it there. It was beautiful. One of the most beautiful parts of the country, very underrated. And then I ended up in Veneto. But sorry, can you just repeat the last part of the question there? Because I just want to make sure that I properly answer the question.
Yeah, no, you're going in the right direction. I mean, tell us about this experience.
Okay, being an Italian citizen in the EU.
Yeah, of being an Italian, the advantages of being an Italian and European. Yeah.
So
that now you are in Portugal.
Right. So that up until December, I was living in Italy, but then in December, I moved to Portugal. So being an Italian dual citizen in Italy and Portugal, I have basically the same access like I would in Italy. So in Italy, I had access to medical services, social services, whatever it may be. In Portugal, I have basically the same rights as I did in Italy, even so much to the systems actually are somewhat intertwined, that even after signing up for the medical services here in Portugal, I got an SMS on my phone about a medication, just a simple daily medication that I take. And at first I thought, okay, this seems like a spam SMS that I'm just getting. And I went on, downloaded the national application from Portugal, and my prescription from Italy had been carried through over to Portugal automatically without having to see a doctor, nothing. Also, even
it's impossible to think for an American where the health system is
well, and not only that, but like the cost of it is like literally 10 times less than what it might cost in the US. I mean, even just on the subject of medical alone, I mean, I had to go to the emergency room a couple of times, unfortunately, while I was in Italy. And there was a couple of times where it cost me 15 euros, including x-rays and pain medication and this and that and the other. And then there was another time where, because it was a little bit more of an emergency, it was a burn, where it ended up costing me nothing. And so, I mean, just that alone is really massive. And then even again, being here in Portugal, similar type of situation. The medical system works a little bit differently here. But then even being a European citizen in Portugal, again, being allowed to work, kind of living in a same way like I would be living in Italy. It's almost in a sense like moving from one United States state to another. So it's kind of like, even though I'm moving from a different country, different culture, different language, in some aspects, there are similarities between life. Okay, I had to get a new tax code here in Portugal, but as a European, specifically in Portugal, you actually have an easier time to be able to get a tax code than people from outside of the European Union. And when I'm saying from outside, that's regardless of whether you're born here or not, just as long as you have the EU passport. But even to be able to start working here right away, I had to open up a company here. And being an Italian citizen actually made that process go a lot easier. because I just had to show my documents from Italy and show that what I'd been doing. From that perspective, it was, again, fantastically easy. And again, going back to talking about being an Italian in Italy, the ability to work within the European Union and have the ability to work with Italian and non-Italian clients, or here in Portugal, the ability to work with Italian clients even from here. Even when you're in Europe, for example, if you're going cross-border and you're going from one European country to another, sales tax ends up getting knocked off of the necessity to pay. Bless you. And being able to have that ease of doing business as a small business owner is extremely important, to be able to limit, especially when things work in a different way than what you might be used to. And again, opening up a bank account here, very simple. And even to be able to move here to Portugal physically was almost just about as easy as it was to be an Italian citizen to move to Italy. And actually, I would say there was even one step less here in Portugal than there was even to move to Italy, because again, like Marco was mentioning earlier, that you have to actually start residing there when you're going through the process. But legally, as an Italian citizen, you have to register your residence. It's just a quick, simple process, and then there's a residency check that happens. But here in Portugal, I arrived, I said, hey, I'm a citizen of Italy, let's do this. And that was it. I sent them an email. They immediately said, okay, come in next Tuesday at 9 o'clock, signed a few papers, and now I have, it almost looks like a university diploma or something, a certificate that says that I'm officially a resident of Portugal as a European Union citizen. So again, like I said, it's really a blessing to be able to have this ability to be able to call this part of the world home.
Great. I mean, so maybe it's so my last question for you is goes back to what you just answered, but how was your life? How you changed since you become an Italian citizen?
I mean, for me, moving to Italy and getting Italian citizenship was something that I had been dreaming about ever since I was a little kid. My grandfather, like I said, he sat me on his lap. He told me the stories. He told me the everything. And so I was, they scrubbed that brain. It wasn't just brainwashing. It was just a good brain scrubbing from a very young age to have this love for a country that I had never known. So it was great to be able to have that realization finally.
How long did it take you to get it?
So I'm the worst person to ask that question to, as Marco knows, because I had so this is actually, like I said, one of the reasons why I regret doing my citizenship on my own, because normally it should only take like 2 years or so, like from the time that, or up to 2 years from when you make the application.
You have somebody like Marco that guides you.
Exactly. So when I started going through the process, it was before I knew Marco, before we were friends, before anything. And the information was contradictory, and it was really, really bad. This is actually also one of the reasons why I started my YouTube channel, was because I wanted to make sure people didn't go through the headache that I did. And to answer your question, it took me 14 years. I wasn't actively going the full 14 years, but all in all, I found out, I actually was the one that got started with it in my family. I was 12 years old, I was watching something on the news, and so it was a long-winded answer, but I wanted to make sure people understand that it's not the normal situation.
You were not minor anymore either.
No. So I had to do it separately from my family. I had one of my parents do it, and then I ended up doing it after.
So if you want to save time, you go with Marco, I guess.
Honestly, like I say this all the time. I really, really wish that Marco and his team had been around. Like I genuinely, looking back on it, if I had the ability to work with them,
absolutely,
I would have gone in that direction.
Such an important work, and that's why we're glad to partner with him, because it's a major interest for a lot of Americans.
It's amazing. And I've had the pleasure to visit Marco's office and to become his friend, and we talk often, but also get to see how Marco and ICA, the rest of ICA and the rest of the lawyers and the team members there work. And really what they do is they just have such attention to detail that I can say I've seen in other aspects from other people who maybe help or claim that they help, that Marco's team really just gives it all the attention that's necessary, and that they even help to find all of the little details about family, your family that maybe even you didn't know. I mean, we've talked about this plenty on our podcast that we do, the Italian Citizenship podcast. We, like Marco's talked about how they've found out parts of families that nobody knew existed, or even addresses or documents for people that they had no clue existed in their family line. So really, I mean, it's quite amazing what they do.
Okay, let's go over the last two questions before we close up. We have JD761 that is raising his hand. I ask him to unmute. Here you are.
Thank you, Sylvia, for the opportunity. Margot and Raphael, I love your videos. Thank you very much for Italian citizenship and Raphael, your videos as well.
Thank you. This is Gerald?
Yes, this is Gerald.
Ah, hello there.
We've spoken a couple times, yes.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for Margot, since we are in the process right now with gathering the documents here in the United States. Now, I know that we have to have an unbroken line of descent in order to qualify for recognition for citizenship. Now, just to give you a short little, thing of what happened, my father was married previously and had my half brother, who is joining in with me with his two daughters. And while my father was married, he had a girlfriend and wound up becoming, the father to a daughter. But the mother did not put his name on her birth certificate and had put her up for adoption without my father's consent. And then my father wound up divorcing her and married my mother, and he had 4 of us kids. Okay, so we have our documents, and my father is now deceased. So my father would not be able to sign a recognition of paternity document, recognize the paternity of my half sister, which he's told us as we were growing up. Is there a way that my half sister might be able to take a sibling paternity test, open up a court case to have my father's name added to her pre-adoption birth certificate so she would qualify?
Thank you, Gerald, for your question. And nice to see you. I saw you before you had your camera on. So it's a very interesting question and complicated situation. And by the way, feel free to contact me in private. We can further discuss this and find the best solution together. Actually, I'm going to send you my link to book with me directly so we can discuss this. But in general, when there is no name on a birth certificate, it means that you have to prove that the father is actually the father. So when the father is married to the mother of the child, then there is no need to prove anything. As you know, they're married. So under Italian law, the Italian law presumes that the father is the person married to the mother. But if they're not married, and what you would need is an acknowledgement of paternity where the father acknowledges that that's his child, which of course we don't have in this case because your father never filed one and he is now deceased. The acknowledgement of paternity could be included in a will. So the father could have said in a will that he could have acknowledged the child as his own. And by the way, just for people who are in this situation, because I came across with this situation recently, and it's not sufficient for the father to just name the child on the will, and just to say, you know, I'll leave everything to my child, all of my money and property, that's not sufficient. We would need a statement where the father says, I acknowledge that this is my child, which are two different things. In one case, you're just leaving your properties to a person that you say it's your child. In the other case, you are acknowledging specifically that you have a child, and the purpose of your statement is to acknowledge that that's your child. But in your specific situation, and to answer the question, you can have a U.S. judge rule on paternity. So you can have a U.S. judge establish that that's the father of that child. You can do it through you just have to basically provide any documents to a U.S. judge for them to be able to rule on the paternity. And if you're able to obtain a judicial establishment of paternity, then the consulate of Italy or any other Italian authority should, in theory, be obligated to accept a ruling from a U.S. judge establishing paternity. So the answer is, if you're able to have a U.S. judge say that person is the father of this child, then you should be able to use that document to apply for that ruling to apply for Italian citizenship by descent.
Okay, I do appreciate, the answer to that, which I told my sister I would mention that with the webinar that we're doing today. So this way I can get back in contact with her about that. But, we can speak more about that and more things as well.
Of course.
So I do appreciate that.
I wanted to say, since we have the last two questions, even if you're over time, but since there are just two, let's just give it if you agree, I would just do with Joanne. I asked Joanne to unmute her microphone if she can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, I'm not Joanne. For some reason, I registered as Charles Boranko, but the name Joanne is my wife's name. Okay. I'll make my question quick. Number one, Marco, can you give me or give us a phone number you to be reached, your organization?
Yeah, we will send out all Marco's information and the registered webinar in the next days.
Oh, great. The other is, this is kind of simple. My grandfather was born in Sicily. He moved here. My father was born in Chicago, and I was born in Chicago. Does that feel pretty straight descent line? Does that make it a little easier? Oh, and plus I'm going to Italy on June the 12th with my daughters.
So it's not necessarily easier. We would have to see if you qualify for citizenship by descent, and that basically is connected to the fact that your I think you said your great grandfather was born in Italy?
my grandfather born in Sicily and moved here to the States.
And then your father was born in Chicago.
My father was born in Chicago. I was born in Chicago. Yep.
Okay. Then we would have to see when exactly your grandfather became a U.S. citizen. If he became a U.S. citizen after your father was born or never became a U.S. citizen, then you would most likely qualify for citizenship. And you can contact us. We can evaluate and research that for free.
And I'm going to Italy with my daughters in June. We're going to go to Cefalù, which is where my family is from in Sicily. Would I be able to go to their city hall, or should I go to city hall and pick up my grandfather's birth certificate?
Sure, you can do that. It's I'm not sure they will pull it up and release it to you on the spot. They may do that, so it's worth trying. You're gonna have to go in the morning because they normally don't work in the afternoon. But if they don't issue a certified copy to you, then we can just request it for you, or you can request it through the mail, or maybe you can just ask them to mail it to you in the U.S. Sometimes they ask you some like a small fee, or maybe to cover the shipping expenses. and just make sure that you request a copy with the parents' names on the birth certificate,
Right.
because there's also a version without the parents' names.
All right, thanks for your help. Thanks for the answer.
Sure.
Thank you. Last question for Chairman Fair. I ask that person to unmute.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you very much for this wealth of information. I really appreciate it. I did get the citizenship myself probably about 15 years ago. So I'm kind of foggy on some of the details, but I got it from my mom, myself, and my daughter. My son was over 18 at that point, so I didn't get it for him. As well, he was living in Ireland. My question is, how do I get, voting information, and they told me I had it, and all my papers, everything was complete and appropriate, which took me a few tries. How do I prove it? When I've gone to Italy, I didn't try to use it or anything like that. And how would my daughter show that she has it? And if we go to Ireland, which we have, how would it be useful there? Because I think Ireland, I know that's kind of a tricky thing with Brexit, but they're still part of the union, right? In a way.
Part of Ireland. Well, one of the islands.
Right. Ireland, not Northern Ireland. My son lives in actual Ireland, Republic of Ireland.
And you mentioned that you and your daughter have citizenship, but your son doesn't.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. He's married and lives there. So
okay.
It's a whole separate situation that I'm not really questioning about that.
Okay. So because when you went through the process, you basically went through the process for the consulate to just acknowledge that you always had Italian citizenship. There is really there isn't like a certificate of citizenship that you get, and the reason is because you applied for recognition of citizenship of your birth status. So there is really no certificate or document that says your citizenship was approved or you became an Italian citizen on this date. So how do you prove that you are an Italian citizen? Well, you can. So for traveling purposes, you just have to use an Italian passport. That will prove that you are an Italian citizen. So if you have to travel internationally, you can use your Italian passport when you go to the European Union, and that will prove that you are a European citizen and will allow you to just be able to reside in the European Union for longer than 90 days, for as long as you need to stay there. But if you wanted for some reason to prove that you are an Italian, besides showing your passport, what you can do is you can contact the municipality in Italy where your birth certificate is registered, which would be the municipality where your ancestor that you used to get Italian citizenship by descent was born. So if it's your father or grandfather, I don't know who is the ancestor who left Italy that you used to claim citizenship, well, your birth certificate will be registered there, your American birth certificate, which is what you provided when you applied for citizenship by descent. And you can ask the municipality to provide you with a copy of your Italian birth certificate. So you will get a birth certificate in Italian, which will list your parents' names, your place of birth abroad in America, and it will be issued by the Italian government and more precisely by the Italian municipality.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, so I'm barely remembering. So if I were to take a trip to Italy, I need to apply for the Italian passport at my consulate here in Chicago.
If you don't have a valid passport, yes, you would have to use the Italian consulate in Chicago to apply for an Italian passport. And they can also tell you, especially because you're registered with the IRA, because you just told me that you get the documents in the mail to vote, they can also tell you where your birth certificate was registered.
Okay, so then that would open up healthcare if we go to Italy, let's say, and then would my husband be accessible to healthcare if something were to happen while we're there because of my citizenship, or no?
Yes, you can have access to the healthcare if you become a resident of Italy, and the same goes to your husband, meaning that if you establish a residency in Italy and he gets a residency permit for spouses, which I talked about that before, then you can both have access to the healthcare.
But not if you're visiting.
So not really if you're visiting. There are some limitations.
Yeah, just when it comes to, sorry, just to tag on to this, if you're visiting Italy as an Italian citizen, there are some caveats that technically you are supposed to be covered, and theoretically you should cover the local health authority for where your family is from to get special special permission for that period of time. But one thing with Italy to always keep in mind is that emergency services are considered a right. So you will always have access to emergency services, even for Americans who are in Italy. They will also have those rights to emergency services. Maybe in some cases they might pay a little bit more, but even then we're not talking about the same prices as you would for healthcare in America.
Sure, I see. Oh, okay. Okay, so just to clarify something, I do, of course, have an American passport, but I don't have an Italian passport, and that I would apply for at the consulate here in Chicago, where I got my citizenship, or where I went through with my papers.
Yes.
But then
also, Marco, would she not be able to apply for the Carta d'Identità, the identity card, in Italy at the Comune where she's registered? Or maybe I'm wrong.
Not if you're not a resident of Italy. So not if you're just visiting.
Okay.
But then isn't there something kind of tricky about when you go in and out of one country, Italy or the US, as to which passport you use?
You want to answer that, Rafael, since you have two passports?
Working on third and fourth. But yeah, actually. Yeah, no. So when it comes to leaving America, have your ticket always on your American passport. But the thing is, in reality, if you're not going to be residing in Italy and you're not going to be spending over 90 days and you have American citizenship, I'm not giving you legal advice, but I'm just telling you the advice that was given to me by a consulate worker in the Middle East. The words that they literally said, well, you're American, they won't look at you. It doesn't matter. They don't care. But if you would like to be able to use the EU citizen line, then you will need your Italian passport. And to show that, when being able to return to the US, you may have to show your Italian passport when leaving Italy and your American passport when entering in America. However, again, if you're only going to be there just for a short vacation, and also so that your family doesn't get separated, like, for example, your husband has to go maybe into another line, then it might be simpler in that case just to have everybody travel on their American passports. However, you can also run into the other type of situation where if it is you and your daughter and your husband is there with you, sometimes you can just say, hey, he's with us in our family, and they'll sometimes, I'm not giving you advice here, but sometimes they let people through in that way.
Okay, I understand. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, thank you. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. We are running. Unfortunately, we have to close our webinar of today. I would like to thank again our special thanks to our guest speakers, Marco and Rafael. And we were also quite pleased to see how much of interest everyone has shown to our webinar today. And in general, we will send the recorded webinar to everyone that did the RSVP in the next days with Marco and Rafael's contacts. Obviously, don't forget to follow them on their podcast on YouTube, Not Your Average Globetrotter. And as you can hear, there's much more to say, and there's the two guys are making it very interesting. So follow them, and thanks again to everyone that attended today, and let us know at info@iacc-chicago.com if you have any questions follow the Chamber on social media and on all our activities. Thank you very much and ciao ciao.
Ciao, grazie mille, buona giornata.
Ciao.